And so Jesus responds to his request with a parable about greed. I invite you to listen for the word of God.
Hear these words from Micah. With what shall I come before the Lord and bow myself before God on high? Shall I come before him with burnt offerings, with calves a year old? Will the Lord be pleased with thousands of rams, with 10,000s of rivers of oil? Shall I give my firstborn for my transgression, the fruit of my body for the sin of my soul? He has told you, O mortal, what is good. And what does the Lord require of you but to do justice, to love kindness, and to walk humbly with your God? And from Luke chapter 12. Someone from the crowd said to him, "Teacher, tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me." Jesus said to him, "Man, who appointed me as judge or referee between you and your brother?" Then Jesus said to them, "Watch out. Guard yourselves against all kind of greed. After all, one's life isn't determined by one's possessions, even when someone is very wealthy." Then he told them a parable. A certain rich man's land produced a bountiful crop. He said to himself, "What will I do? I have no place to store my harvest." Then he thought, "Here's what I'll do. I'll tear down my barns and build bigger ones. That's where I'll store all my grain and goods. I'll say to myself, 'You have stored up plenty of goods, enough for several years. Take it easy, eat, drink, and enjoy yourself.' But God said to him, 'Fool, tonight you will die. Now who will get these things that you have prepared for yourself? This is the way it will be for those who hoard things for themselves and aren't rich toward God.'"
This week and next week, we're going to be looking at this book, Toxic Charity by Robert Lupton. My goal this week and next week is to intrigue you, entice you, create a desire in you to get a hold of this book and read it cover to cover. It is absolutely worth it. We have it in the narthex. You can get it online. You can have it downloaded to your e-reader, but it is absolutely worth it. On Saturday, October 5th, from 9 to 3, Robert Lupton, the author of Toxic Charity, will be here. We are hosting an event where he is the main event, and he will be talking about this book. This book is a reflection of 40 years of mission in the city of Atlanta and all the things that he has learned. He is a warm and engaging man, and when you read this book, there may be parts in here that you just absolutely agree with. There may be parts in here that you really push back on. There may be parts in here that you have questions about. And I would encourage you, take notes, write things down, because a significant part of his presentation are questions and answers. And I want us to come prepared for that. So make sure that you are a part of that. And I want to kind of introduce Bob Lupton to you in a way. We have a video clip that is him talking about his call to mission. And I want to show this to you for a couple of reasons. One, I want you to hear his call to mission. It's interesting. And secondly, I want you to see what kind of a presenter he is. He is warm and gracious, and he's a good storyteller, and he's certainly somebody I would be willing to listen to for a day. So let's take a look at that.
41 years ago today, I was in the jungles of Vietnam. That was the war of the day. Thought it would be the worst year in my life. It ended up actually being the most transformative year in my life. Was working among a lot of young men who were drafted out of the inner city, and was able to help them get their high school GEDs and set up an amnesty drug abuse program. What God did in my life was ignite within me a sense of calling to work with troubled youth. When I came back to the States, I started a program with the juvenile court in Atlanta. Didn't take very long to figure out that if you're going to work effectively with young men, you've got to be involved with their families. So we started expanding our work to include families, only to realize over time that if you're going to work effectively with struggling families, you've got to be involved in the environment that impacts on them every time they step out of the door. And so we expanded again what we were doing and took it more to the streets and to the schools and with what was going on with the police. And in time it became apparent that if you're going to change a community, the best way to do it is become a part of that community. And so it became increasingly clear to me that God was calling us as a family to become neighbors among those we had a sense of calling to serve. Now, that's not something that you share easily or quickly with one's spouse, particularly when you're building your dream home a little farther out in the suburbs. And we were actually about 5 weeks away from that move when, and I had kept this to myself, when Peggy just wanted to talk. We were making all those exciting decisions about the carpet and the cabinetry and the lights, and I said, I don't think you want to talk to me tonight. And then it was, what's wrong? And for the first time I shared with her, I didn't think God wanted us moving farther out, but he wanted us moving in. That was a bad night. In the morning she said, is this your idea or God's idea? She said, if it's your idea, I'm not interested at all. She said, I want it in writing. That was the first time I had articulated in a 7-page letter this sense of calling that I had, and she took that around to her girlfriends and our small group leader and our pastors, and eventually she came to the conclusion that at least I believed that it was a call of God. And if it was, what choice do you really have? And so she gave up her dream and we moved into the inner city of Atlanta, which was clearly the most significant move that our family ever made, and the most significant move that our ministry ever made.
So does that make you a little nervous when you hear somebody talking about that kind of call of God? Well, I want to tell you, we didn't look at this clip because I think God is calling all of us to give up our houses in the suburbs and move to the city. It's not that at all. But what I do want to point out is that that was a profound and obviously compelling call for Bob Lupton. And he and his family, I give his wife just as much credit as him, made the decision to give up their dream home and move into the city. And they not only did that, but more than 40 years later, they're still there and they're still doing the work. And they're willing to share the things that they have learned. To me, that makes this guy the real deal. To me, that makes him somebody who is worth listening to. Absolutely. I see him as a go-to person for mission. I see him as one who was called by God to leadership in mission. So when I read this book, something became apparent to me that I probably already knew, but hadn't really paid much attention to. I know very little about mission. I am an ordained elder in the United Methodist Church, and I know very little about mission. I am an associate pastor in a large United Methodist Church, and what that means is that I specialize. My title is Pastor of Congregational Care. I am responsible for making sure that our Stephen Ministry program is healthy and vital, that our visitation program to the homebound is healthy and vital, that our hospital visits are being made, and that we're keeping track of all of this. I'm expected to be reading up on congregational care and reaching out to other churches and finding out things that they do that we could glean. I am to be the go-to person for congregational care. That is the lion's share of my time. and I'm delighted because it aligns with my spiritual gifts. When you're in a church this size, we are blessed because we have clergy and staff who are specialists. And since we are talking about mission, I lift up Reverend Beth Elders, who is our Director of Outreach and Mission, who does an outstanding job, and her entire outreach and mission team. This is a group of people that come together regularly and put in an enormous amount of time and energy to reaching out to other churches and institutions to find out what's happening. They are usually reading a book, and they are constantly looking at the things that we are already doing with the intention of improving them. They are people who are called to leadership and mission. And the wonderful thing for me is that I don't have to be an expert on mission to do good mission in this church if I just follow their directive. And the same is true for all of you. We are blessed. We are blessed with a team that is on the cutting edge of things, and they are totally on board with this book. And it would help them if we would read it and if we would come see Bob Lupton. What else is exciting is that we've discovered, and they knew, that they've been moving in the direction of one of his major emphases in this book, and they've been moving in that direction for some time. And I can give you an example of that in a moment, but first I want to share Bob Lupton's definitions of mercy and justice having to do with mission. He writes, "Justice is fairness or reasonableness, especially in the way people are treated or decisions are made. Mercy is compassion, kindness, or forgiveness, shown especially to someone over whom a person has power. Twinned together, these commands lead us to a holistic involvement. Divorced, they become deformed. Mercy without justice denigrates into dependency and entitlement, preserving the power of the giver over the recipient. Justice without mercy is cold and impersonal, more concerned about rights than relationships. The addict needs both food and treatment. The young woman needs both, a safe place to sleep and a way out of her entrapping lifestyle. Street kids need both, friendship and jobs. Mercy is a door, an opening, an invitation to touch a life, to make a difference, but it is not a destination." Justice and mercy when it comes to mission. I was trying to come up with an analogy that would kind of help you understand what he is trying to say. And so if the analogy misses, don't blame him, it's mine. But when we look at mercy, think of this. Think of someone you've just seen has just gotten this terrible, deep, dangerous gash in their arm. What is the first thing that needs to happen? You got to stop the bleeding, right? So you need to find something to make a tourniquet, and you apply the tourniquet and the bleeding stops, and you maybe even find a bandage, and that's mercy. Now what? Well, we know a wound like that without follow-up care will probably become infected, would probably never heal correctly, and the person could even possibly lose their arm. When we look at mission, mercy is one-way giving. It's crisis response in a crisis situation, which is absolutely necessary. I mean, there'd be no use for follow-up care if the bleeding hadn't stopped. So the mercy is critical. It's absolutely critical, but it's not enough. Then there has to be follow-up care. So in mission, it's an investment not only of resources, but of time, of talent, of planning, of development, and absolutely of relationship building. Mercy is one-way giving, and it's necessary in a crisis situation. Justice is giving and receiving. And this is very important. It is not one-way giving. It is giving and receiving, and it's ongoing, which makes it more of a challenge. Our Sneakers with Soul program that started 4 years ago is a great example of the way our outreach and mission team understands this and is taking us in this direction. And I want to share this with you because it's exciting. 4 years ago, first year of Sneakers with Soul, we collected shoes, we collected sneakers. And if you're not familiar, Sneakers with Soul is we collect new sneakers for kids who otherwise wouldn't have a new pair of shoes to start the school year. So that first year we collected sneakers. We collected a lot of sneakers, and we hit our goal. And on the day that we hit our goal, and it was the last day of collecting, it was so exciting. We celebrated here in worship. We called the Operation Food Search truck. They showed up, we loaded up the shoes on the truck, and the shoes went away. We had nothing to do with the distribution. Now, there would have been no distribution if we hadn't collected the shoes to begin with, but our beginning and end was with the mercy and not with the justice. So our team knew that now it was time to develop this. So the following year, we collected shoes, but then, when it was time to deliver them, we took them. Members of this church took them, and we took them to Kingdom House. And we helped distribute these shoes. And there was food, and there was a worship service, and there was a little chaos. It was kind of crazy, but it worked, and it was better. And we had interaction with the folks, the families who were receiving, and that was a really good step. Last year, it gets even better. Last year, the shoes are collected, and this time we, as a congregation, take them to Peabody Elementary School, which is the elementary school where most of the kids who receive these shoes attend. It's their turf, okay? Police in the area and fire department in the area were called to be a part of this celebration. There was a fire truck. There was an ambulance that the kids could look at. There were police and firefighters in uniform that the kids could talk to. And there were things that the parents were required to do. The parents, they came through, and before they received the shoes, they went through a room where there were really useful social services represented, and they walked through and they met with these people, and they received the information that they needed, and once they got all the way through the room and got all this good information, then they received the shoes, but not only shoes, backpacks and school supplies. And when all that was collected, they were back out on the playground, and it was food and games, and oh my goodness, what a change from 2 years before that. This year, it's going to be the same thing, only this year they're going to add something like a personal shopper. When the families get through the social services area, there's going to be a personal shopper from our church to help them go along and collect the shoes they need and the backpacks and the school supplies to help carry the stuff and to get to know these people. And they get to know us. This is remarkable. When you think about the first year, we collected all these shoes and then they just went away. And now what? Now there's giving and receiving. Now there's relationship building. Now there's a sense of neighborhood. There's a sense of neighborhood because we collected shoes. I think Bob Lupton would be really, really proud of our outreach and mission team. This is amazing development in a very, very short period of time. Bob Lupton talks about the danger of compassion, and we're going to talk more about this next week. But he talks about the danger of compassion. He is the first one to say that crisis situations require crisis response. Absolutely. When there is some kind of natural disaster and people need food and clothing and shelter and medical care, this stuff has to happen now. And it's one-way giving, because folks can't do that for themselves at that point. But then there has to be follow-up. There has to be the justice part of this. There has to be, what do we do now? The thing that he gets concerned about, especially when it comes to folks in the church, we have big hearts, we have a lot of compassion, and we see need, we want to take care of it, and we want to take care of it right away. It's a great thing to meet crisis need with crisis response, but all too often, says Bob Lupton, we meet chronic need with crisis response. And his message in this book is that we are actually hurting the receivers when we do that. We are hurting the receivers when we do that. Now, when I first read that, that was really hard for me to swallow. And it may be for some of you. And depending on where you're at with this, you may be thinking, well, yeah. And you also might be thinking, what did she say? So pick up the book. Pick up the book, because he explains it really, really well. And you know, we don't want to read books we just agree with. We need to look at other ways of doing this, and We will look at that more next week. O mortal, what does the Lord require of you? What does the Lord require of us? But to do justice and to love mercy and to walk humbly with our God. And in this church, we are absolutely blessed to have mission leaders that make it possible for each and every one of us to do just that. Thanks be to God. Amen.